You're watching the Eternal Tournament Series.
Morning or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be. I am SirRhino, and I am here to bring you the Eternal Tournament Series Season 6, Week 5 Open Series. Yes, here we are. This is a particularly special weekly open, as it is the first one where the new cards from the new adventure, The Tale of Horus Traver, are legal. So we'll be seeing a lot of those new cards today, as there are some doozies as we get into it. Here we actually see a few in these two decks matched up right here, as we're bringing you sifudanny on Argenport Control against Unearthly on Rakano Aggro. So on sifudanny's side of the board, Argenport Control, but the big thing here is 4 of Tavrod Auric Broker. It's a new card from the Tale of Horus Traver. He's a 5/7 Minotaur with Endurance. Whenever he attacks, you look at the top 5 cards of your deck, and you can pick a Minotaur and a weapon from those and put them in your hand, and they get buffed, and it's pretty sweet. So we're going to see a lot of Tavrod today, and this is just one shell that you can play him in. We're going to see him in Armory variants and all sorts of other things. Basically, if you can cast Argenport cards, you're going to see Tavrod in the deck almost assuredly, at least for today. So on the other side of the board, we have Unearthly bringing Rakano, as I'm sure some people here might be surprised to hear. But it's a different take on Rakano, not Rakano Plate. This is a Rakano that's clearly adapted and anticipating these kind of Argenport or Return of Armory style decks, where it's going to be slogging through a lot of removal. This Rakano deck, if I counted correctly, is bringing 36 units, it looks like. No plates, no Shogun Scepters. They're in the sideboard. No real weapons to speak of. The weapon producer here is Aijin Imperial Armor. So this is all about just loading up with as many units as possible, trying to get under removal. You see the full suite of 12 1-drops, 4 Fearless Nomad, 4 Oni Ronin, 4 Pyro Knight, full suite of 12 2-drops, Crown Watch Paladin, notably over Tinker Overseer, going for that Aegis instead of the flying. And then a new card appears right there in the 3-drop slot. A card we're actually going to see a lot of today, and that's Cinder Yeti, a 3/2 Overwhelm with Warp, and when you summon it, exhausts a unit in play. This card, I think, appeared in as many or maybe more deck lists than Tavrod. So one of the higher impact cards for the ETS today will be Cinder Yeti. But I'm not going to break down this matchup too much more, so we're going to give the players a go-ahead here, get them readied up, and we'll get into the Eternal action. The other big thing I want to note with Unearthly's list, though, is it's also heavy on combat tricks. 4 Finest Hour, 2 Strength of Many. So not a card we've seen a lot of in the ETS, that's for sure. But when you're going this wide with this many units, that Strength of Many's value goes up quite dramatically. We're talking +4, +4, +5, +5 for 2 power. That can go a long way. So here we go. The game is underway. Sifudanny's on the play. And while Unearthly, has a lot of 1-drops, doesn't have a great opener here. Double Fire Sigil with some Valkyrie Enforcers and every card in his hand requiring Justice. He's gonna need to draw a Justice Source, and doesn't look like he does it, at least quite yet. So Sifudanny's got to be happy that Unearthly is off to a real slow start here, and now he can either play down one of these Copper Hall Bailiffs or a Privilege of Rank. We'll see if he decides, just develop the power, save the Bailiffs to actually devalue your opponent's units. Copper Hall Bailiff is a card that actually came out in Jex Bounty, but is really making his presence felt since Tavrod got printed, as he is one of the better Minotaurs printed, and people have been having a lot of great results with him lately. He's seen play here and there in the meantime, but now is really making him felt. Unearthly finally finds that Justice Source will at least get to play some cards this game, as he lays down a Crown Watch Paladin, a Fearless Nomad, and now Sifudanny responds in kind by going with the Throne Warden, get some armor, get a really nice unit with Aegis up, and just swings in with the Bailiff to trade with a Nomad and also get a war. So yeah, these Bailiffs are really cool in that they're a way to manage these go wide decks when you don't have Harsh Rule. And can also be incidental Aegis poppers to make your removal better. Bailiff is just doing a lot in these mid-rangier Justice decks when you combine it with something like Valkyrie Enforcer and things like that. Traditionally, it was kind of neck and neck with Spirit Guide, but I think with the advent of Tavrod, Auric Broker, it's kind of pulled ahead in that race. So here we see the Bailiff come down, Throne Warden comes in, and then Slay goes down on the Aijin Imperial Armor. Does not want to let Unearthly activate Aijin and start getting very large units just yet. All right, when Unearthly now is this is going to be basically the rest of the game from him, just playing lots of units every turn because his deck is lots of units, but sifudanny's got the large units and has more where that came from with a Steward of the Past, a Slay, double Harsh Rule in hand. So here comes Steward, which can currently block everything, but you got to be very Unearthly, as we mentioned before, playing 6 Combat Tricks main deck and has a whole lot of quick draw on the board already with Rakano Outlaw and Champion of Glory. Of course, Unearthly does not have a combat trick in hand yet, but does crucially draw a second Justice source, unlocks these Valkyrie Enforcers, and takes to the skies with them. One of the weaknesses of these Argenport-based decks is they are a little weak to flying, depending on how you build them, especially if you're all in on Minotaurs. sifudanny's deck doesn't quite have that problem because you're backing it up with enough removal to get the job done and take care of certain threats. Here we see the Silent Steward of the Past make an attack in, and we'll see if Unearthly wants to double or triple block it in any sort of fashion. If he wants to double block it, that means giving up either your Flyer or your Champion of Glory. And it looks like Unearthly's okay with doing that, as we see the Champion of Glory and Crown Watch Paladin go on the Steward of the Past. And by blocking with the Crown Watch Paladin that has Aegis, this allows Unearthly to play around Annihilate, and that's why you're seeing him. And actually, sifudanny then does take out the Crown Watch Paladin because it has Aegis. It just makes these Harsh Rules and Slays a lot cleaner. Players can look at each other's deck lists, and so sifudanny knows he does not have to worry about any of the units Unearthly has gaining Aegis. There are 0 Protect and Unearthly's 90 cards between both the main deck and the sideboard, which makes sense, right? He's taking a quantity over quality approach essentially here. You're not building up units too often, and if you are, you're not investing cards to do so. So Protect doesn't make quite as much sense in this list. Here we see Unearthly drew a Torch return, but opting to, again, just take to the skies with Valkyrie, pop the Aegis on the Throne Warden, vanquish it down. I think we'll see sifudanny block one of these units and then just unload the Harsh Rule next turn. It's just a question of, does he want to prevent 1 extra damage from this Champion of Glory? Does it want to just block 2 damage instead, get to swing in for a War Cry, and then use Harsh Rule? And we see he doesn't mind taking 1 extra damage there. The 1 more War Cry is slightly more valuable. And we're going to go into top deck mode now, where sifudanny still has a Harsh Rule and a Slay in hand, whereas Unearthly only has a Torch. So you've got to think sifudanny's favored at this point in the game, especially when his deck has 2 Sleepless Night, 2 Sword of the Sky King, 4 Tavrod, 2 Inquisitor Mokto, just way higher quality of top decks. But still, you have to draw him. And as we see here right now, all sifudanny grabs was a Privilege of Rank, which at least filters out the deck. And wow, that's a real nice grab from Unearthly. A buffed up Crown Watch Paladin means sifudanny's going to have to invest 2 cards to take it out if he wants to, or can take some hits from it for now. But it looks like he's just going to get the 2-for-1 here, Annihilate, and Slay come down. So now Unearthly's got to find another threat, and sifudanny just has a Harsh Rule in hand. The draw, and there's the threat from sifudanny. Tavrod in the flesh with some War Cries makes him an 8/10. And yeah, That's a big old Bessie as Tavrod swings, activates the ability, and we'll see if sifudanny finds anything in the top 5. Nope. Looks like Mokdo, Steward of the Past, Cat Burglar, and some power gets thrown into the bin. But that's okay. Tavrod's still an 8-10, and will continue his rampage here. So Unearthly still has a Finest and a Torch, but it turns out Finest plus Torch plus a 3-1 is not enough to deal with Tavrod. Ooh, gets to warp in a Cinder Yeti, already premiumed out, Unearthly on top of that, but does not get to use the Cinder Yeti on Tavrod as he has Endurance, but still can double block Tavrod and use Torch on it, as we see Finest Hour come out to save the Nomad. And we'll see if sifudanny wants to swing with Tavrod here, and I think it's a pretty reasonable move to do. Like, even if you think they have another Finest Hour or Torch, you're wiping out all of their resources, and Tavrod's probably drawing something, as we see Tavrod draw a Tavrod and an Auric Runehammer, and that's going to end the game, as this will clear out Unearthly's board. Unearthly not using Torch there to finish off Tavrod just yet, in case that weapon was something that died to Torch. But Auric Runehammer being immune to damage means it won't get taken out here, and the game ends in sifudanny's favor. So that game showed off the power of Tavrod. It turns out Tavrod finding Tavrod, common line you're going to see quite often that can really just end the game at that spot. And now we're going to move to sideboarding. So Unearthly is down a game, and certainly has a sideboard prepared for this matchup, I would say. 4 Rebuke is not a card you see too much of, but it notably can stun and silence a unit, which taking out Tavrod for even a turn or two at that stage of the game is sometimes all you need to do. So we'll see if that ends up coming in here. Crimson Fireball is a nice big flyer. Another new card from the set, a 5/4 flyer for 4 that when it connects reduces the cost of your next card. Not too important, the cost reduction in this deck. But having just a big singular threat like that, just upping the quality of your threats in this kind of matchup can go a long way. Or Grunehammer is a card that could also potentially come in here. It kills most of the units in sifudanny's deck. It's missing out on Mokdo, Tavrod, and Steward if it's unbuffed, but it also attacks from a different angle where sifudanny can't necessarily use removal on it, although against 4 Vera's favor, maybe not quite as appealing. On the other end, sifudanny has 4 Suffocates he can bring in, 2 Life Drinkers. I think those will be the big things that stand out. Normally, it makes sense to bring in extra Vanquishes against Rakano, but again, this Rakano deck isn't about building up big units. It's really just swarming with small stuff. So I think just already being on 2 Vanquish and 4 Slay might be enough as far as dealing with the big stuff. But we'll see how that goes, as we currently have a camera on Unearthly sideboarding as he's figuring out exactly what he wants. And it looks like some of the combat tricks came out. I don't see any Strength of Many. He's debating on cutting some of the torches. There's a decent number of torch targets, though. I don't think those will come out. And okay. Yeah, the Fire Mauls aren't coming in. Probably just a little too slow for the matchup is my guess here. Just wants to keep the threats low to the ground and keep pounding with them. Wow, just actually going with Rebukes completely over Vanquish, so that in case he needs to push through these early Copper Hall Bailiffs or Steward of the Past, that's just more important than having Vanquish for just Tavrod. So we see that swap happen as well, where we're playing more Rebukes than Vanquishes. All right, so looks like they're about to send out this challenge, and we'll hop in to observe all the action, assuming sifudanny's also done with sideboarding. And looks like we're still waiting on that a little bit more. That's okay. There we go. So let's hop on in here and check out what mulligans and hands we're looking at. All right, well, I think sifudanny will keep this hand. It's not the earliest removal possible, but early enough with an Annihilate, especially being on the play, you're pretty happy with this. Copperhall Bailiff is excellent against this style of Rakano as well. And there we see the turn 1 Oni Ronin from Unearthly, and we'll be able to follow it up with 2 more 1-drops as well, as we see sifudanny uses Annihilate here. And we're going to get to see the strength of Copperhall Bailiff against this kind of start, where it's taking out 2 strength essentially and presenting a really nice blocker. Of course, it won't be a blocker this upcoming turn because Unearthly can Cinder Yeti it and get through a Warcry. Notably there, Unearthly did draw a Crown Watch Paladin, but opted to go wider instead of taller. So here we go, Cinder Yeti in the flesh, pushing through just 1 Warcry, but also getting a 3-2 body on the board. And sifudanny for the turn draws a Slay. I mean, you could Slay the Yeti just because it can profitably attack into Bailiff right now. Unless he's more concerned about taking out Warcries, but instead is just going to choose to hold onto the Slay, which is a little surprising considering you have double Slay. Again, your opponent's not really building up units. If you're concerned about Pyro Knight eventually ulting, you could preemptively do it. But either way, Slay is held on to. Mokdo comes down here. He's a big old 5/5. And we'll see what Unearthly on Rakano can do about that. Did not play out the Champion of Glory last turn, did not want to extend too much into a harsh rule, but now has to think about if he wants to play this Valkyrie Enforcer to take to the skies and at least have some sort of threat that can get the job done. Notably, he did draw the 5th power, so if Unearthly finds a 6th power, Pyro Knight can become large enough to at least trade with Mokdo. But here we see just the A-Space comes in, gets those 2 Warcries, try and buff up whatever. Unearthly's just hoping to buff up whatever he finds next. And Valkyrie Enforcer will take Mokdo out of the skies, but he'll still be very, very healthy here as a 5/5. So now sifudanny might finally relent and pull the trigger on Slay on this Pyro Knight. But I think we're at least going to see Slay come down on Valkyrie Enforcer and maybe just play out the Cat Burglar, as it's another card that can trade with Pyro Knight here instead. Even if you take a little bit of damage, you're not against a deck with a ton of reach. So you're not too concerned if Pyro Knight gets in for 3 damage of Overwhelm here or something like that. Unearthly draws Rebuke for the turn, though. So gets the Warcry in with Oni Ronin and a little bit more damage, but had to use Rebuke on Cat Burglar instead of the 5/5 Mokdo. So that's still a decent win there for sifudanny, who pulls the trigger on Slay with the Champion of Glory. That's a little surprising by me, knowing that your opponent has a couple Warcries stored up. You only saw 1 get used on that Valkyrie Enforcer, so I think that means there were 3 unaccounted for. But decided to just use the Slay on the Champion of Glory anyways and just try and get aggressive here, as we see sifudanny hits the A-Space with both Cat Burglar and Mokdo. Unearthly didn't play a power last turn because he drew a Torch, so this Pyro Knight won't be able to get an ultimate, as Valkyrie Enforcer silences it before Unearthly hits 6 power. And the Warcries keep coming, though, as Torch takes out that Valkyrie Enforcer. Oni Ronin gets in a Warcry. Unearthly hides the Fire Sigil that was drawn for turn, and sifudanny also continues to draw power. So Unearthly's really hoping to find whatever received those Warcries, because sifudanny does not have an answer to it. So we'll see what the draw step is for Unearthly. It's a Vanquish, so that still is useful here. And also leaves back Pyro Knight so that something like a Vera's Favor isn't lethal. And yeah, we see the Pyro Knight chump block there, keep Unearthly at 4. sifudanny drew a harsh rule for turn, and that'll help bail him out from if Unearthly finds whatever got all of these Warcries. The real question is, did Unearthly find it? It looks like instead Unearthly found another Rebuke. So he's got to decide, does he even want to use Rebuke here? Does he just want to accept the fact that if sifudanny draws something like Vera's Favor or Torch, he's just going to lose anyways, right? And we see here, holds on to the Rebuke, lets sifudanny get in for 3. sifudanny drew a Suffocate and is saving that, which is also, I think, kind of questionable, knowing that your opponent has so many Warcries on top of this deck. You're not going to find many more great Suffocate targets in the meantime, as long as this Oni Ronin's still getting war cries in. I think the idea there, though, is that Harsh Rule will clean up this mess, and hopefully the next thing they do draw with just one war cry still dies to. So sifudanny did draw a Steward of the Past here. Unearthly notably used Rebuke there, just in case sifudanny had a removal spell for this Pyro Knight, did not want to die to that. And now sifudanny's got to decide what they're going to do here. I feel like it's going to be a Harsh Rule, but he won't be able to follow it up with Steward. And instead is just going for Steward of the Past. Trying instead to get the lethal with Steward plus Cat Burglar, as Cat Burglar will be unstunned the next turn, and you have the Suffocate for Oni Ronin. So if Unearthly doesn't draw a unit here, you could have lethal. Of course, Unearthly did draw a unit and has a Cinder Yeti on top of their deck. So they can play out 2 units here. I don't think he's going to overextend that far into something like Harsh Rule at this point, but he's got to be thinking about not only winning the game, but protecting his own life total. That's a tough dance to navigate here. So if he doesn't play out this iGen, sifudanny could have lethal with any removal spell. So it's really a question of what is Unearthly going to respect or play around here. But now we see another Cinder Yeti on top of the deck. So now Unearthly can just warp in that one as well and have enough blockers here to play around a removal spell if he thinks, and dig further into his deck. So I think we're going to see that other Cinder Yeti get in here. That makes a little more sense than playing the iGen. Or he'll just allow himself to die to a spot removal spell. But Unearthly's been respecting it so far, so we might continue to see that respect get matched here. He is really debating on whether or not Cinder Yeti. I don't know if he wants to keep it there as like a guaranteed top deck. But, I mean, it's just... I think it's better than keeping it on top of your... So, yeah, there we see it. Cinder Yeti gets warped in. The draw for sifudanny there is Steward of the Past. Harsh Rule's not gonna get lethal or anything like that because it would kill his own units. And we just see sifudanny maybe plunge in here. Yeah, doesn't want to use Suffocate. I think it's just going to use Harsh Rule to reset the board. Unearthly has so much Overwhelm in play, and another Yeti or removal now could actually mean sifudanny dies, being at 6 health with that much Overwhelm damage on the other side of the board. And yeah, we see this here. Harsh Rule comes down. So Rakano, normally not a deck you think about as being able to keep up in top deck wars, but that warp value from the Yeti, the ultimate value of Pyro Knight, even though it didn't get ultimated there, iGen's activations, these were all huge things here. But wow, what a draw from sifudanny. Finds the Auric Runehammer here, which will allow him to suffocate the Valkyrie Enforcer, Runehammer the iGen, and then have a lethal hammer in play if Unearthly doesn't draw anything. So we'll see if that's the route he chooses to go, or will he decide to go Steward plus Suffocate instead? I think I would prefer the Runehammer route, but we'll see what sifudanny opts to go with, as there might be some merit to just getting the unit down instead and backing it up with a hammer going forward. The only issue with this line is if now Unearthly does draw a unit, they can exhaust iGen to put an armor on it almost certainly right away, unless Unearthly draws a 3-cost unit. Now, if Unearthly whiffs, none of this matters anyway. Okay, going Steward hammer the Valkyrie Enforcer, but now you don't have a target for Suffocate. Interesting. But it is power efficient. I just don't know if it's the best use of the spells you have there. But looks like it worked out anyways. Unearthly scoops it up as he drew a Rakano banner for turn, and sifudanny takes that one 2-0. So there we go. Tavgod making his presence felt in the first match. Doesn't show up in the second one, but the rest of the role players get it done. Unearthly, though, with both hands, showing the resiliency and the power of an iGen there. But apparently that was the last match of the round, or close to it. I think we have one other match outstanding. A lot of 2-0s and quick matches going through this ETS. So we're going to call the round there, and we'll be back with round 2 coverage after this short break.